BMW tells us this is a sports coupe. Whatever your take on that, this second-generation version of their X4 is certainly an interesting take on fashionable family motoring, an avant-garde mid-sized crossover coupe you'd want to be seen in. If you can afford the fee, it's a tempting take on the SUV genre, and if you like the looks, then you'll probably like everything else, because it's pure BMW, even down to the now much improved driving dynamics. It's also a little more practical than you might expect. True, the world may not need another car like this, but you certainly might.
BMW thinks that coupe SUV models should offer more than just sleeker looks. The driving experience should be sharper and more dynamic too. With the original X4, only nominal efforts were made in that regard. Marginal reduction in ride height, a slight stiffening of the springs. With this Mark II model though, we're promised that the job has been done properly. It does help, of course, that the fundamentals are so much better this time around. The much stiffer CLAR cluster architecture platform, for example, and as standard on all variants, there's a redeveloped xDrive four-wheel drive system which uses a planetary gear set incorporated within the rear axle to vary drive between each individual rear wheel as you power through the corners. A perfect 50-50 front-to-rear weight distribution also helps here, as does the way that the rear track has been widened by 30mm over the previous model. And there's more. The front end has been thoroughly re-engineered and now features a new double wishbone suspension setup. That helps to bring you greater levels of feedback through the retuned steering system. In addition, as before, there's a lower ride height than you'll get in the X3, so a lower centre of gravity. And stiffer suspension too, with firmer M Sport springs fitted as standard this time around. It all delivers a pretty astonishing degree of handling competence for a model professing to be any sort of SUV, and it's possible to carry impressively high speeds through tightening turns without tyre squealing drama. Engine-wise, from launch, buyers of this model were offered a choice of BMW's two usual mainstream diesels, the 190 HP 2-litre 4-cylinder unit we're trying here, and an alternative 265 HP 3-litre 6-cylinder power plant. Either way, you get four-wheel drive and an 8-speed automatic gearbox as standard, and decent efficiency too. This xDrive 20D variant can manage up to 52.3 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 142 grams per kilometre of CO2. At the top of the X4 range, there are also a couple of 3-litre 6-cylinder M performance derivatives, the 326 HP M40d diesel and the 354 HP petrol M40i. This X4 is subtly bigger and sleeker in second generation form, 81mm longer, 37mm wider and 3mm lower. Statistics that deliver dynamically stretched proportions intended to emphasise this model's perfect 50-50 weight distribution and to hint at its performance potential. The overall statement all of this makes continues not to be quite as extreme as the one that's delivered by BMW's larger X6, but it still catches the eye, a little more modestly holding two fingers up to the establishment. At the wheel, you sit a little lower than you would in an X3, but the position is still quite commanding, and the cabin you survey is now of much higher quality than was the case with the previous model. The sports seats are now more supportive, all the materials used feel great to touch, and the proper leather and metal finishing on this plusher variant feels very special indeed. Most models have a 10.25-inch professional multimedia center dash iDrive screen setup, and the instrument binnacle display will probably feature at least a dash of BMW's virtual digital cockpit technology, as it does here. Time to take a seat in the rear. Average-sized adults should be fine, but 6-footers will either need to slouch in their seats or ride with their heads brushing the roof lining. This narrow central seating position and this rather prominent centre transmission tunnel will together also make it quite difficult to accommodate 3 folk. Right, let's take a look out back. Once the powered hatch rises, you'll find it necessary to negotiate, well, quite a high loading limit before you can get anything in. But once you've done that, you'll be able to access 525 litres of capacity, In summary, don't be dissuaded if you'd like an X4. This may not be quite the sharpest dynamic contender in its segment, but it's still an astonishingly rewarding steer for something based on SUV underpinnings. Now yes, there is an element of compromise in its packaging, but the world would be a dull place if we only bought cars on a pragmatic basis. This one does defy sense and sensibility, but that's all part of its appeal and why you might really, really want one.